Hi, I'm Vanessa with Ellie and Mac, and I am so excited to have you back here today. We are going to be doing a trouser extravaganza. We're going to cover all the components to make the perfect pair of trousers. Do you want to have the perfect slip pockets, or maybe you want to have welt pockets with zippers? Do you know how to blind hem? We're going to be covering that today. And we're also going to talk about how to add zippers with elastic or just what elastic is most comfortable. We're going to be dealing with dart tucks. We have it all. This video is just, it has it all to make the perfect trousers of your dreams. But this is also video 3 of our accessibility series. So not only are you going to end up with the most comfortable pants, but it is your choice if you would like to end up with some that are also wheelchair accessible. Whoa, I know that is so much in the introduction, but we're going to be covering it all, and it's going to be such a fun video. Now, when I got this accessible series, I was so excited, and I'm so grateful for the comment about wheelchair accessibility. I learned so much in doing the research for this, so we're going to kind of break these pants down in pieces a little differently than we normally do. First off, the pattern I used was Ellie Mac's Feel Pretty. I love these pants. We hack them so much here. They're just a really good fit. But let's say if you don't happen to have that pattern just yet, you can try these hacks with just a pair of pajama pants. Just make sure that you have side seams. Also, I wanted to show how you can use your sewing machine because I feel like sometimes when we have these little situations, we're not sewing because it's a hobby, but we're sewing because it's a necessity. And so I want to show that how you can create these beautiful, adorable pants with just your sewing machine. There are pieces that I do serge, but for the most part, you can do this completely with your sewing machine. So get ready for that. Now, let's first talk about the waistbands and the cut of these pants. So with the wheelchair pants, you want to make sure that you have a high elastic. And so this is so if you're leaning forward, you're going to be able to have that back nice and close to your body. But you also need zippers down the sides so you can be able to remove your pants however you need to. So for this pattern, I cut it normally, but I did the normal waistband, and we're going to actually do a 2.5-inch elastic. Now on my other pants, I chose a shorter elastic. I also added some dart tucks in there. And the reason for this, if you're using this hack to recover from, let's say, a hip surgery, you're going to have incisions either on your thigh or in your bikini line. And both of those, you're going to want a little extra space. Sometimes when we're recovering from surgery, we're back to work before we're fully recovered. So I wanted to make sure we had some extra comfortable pants in here. These pants would actually be perfect for maternity pants as well. There's lots of space, very comfortable, and they're very nice. They're the wide leg pants that are just so in. So these are perfect for everyone. So let's get to the cutting table.
Up first are these extra wide leg pinstripe pants. I love this fabric. It has a nice stretch to it. And I want the width to be the same width as where the shorts are. And so there's not going to be any taper along the ankles. And then I'm going to be cutting 3 inches across on the highest waistline. So the point here is we're going to add 3 inches to the center of this pattern. So once I have it chalked in, then I'm going to move my pattern 3 inches over. Now I measured the width of my pattern and then I subtracted 1.5 inches, and that's where this chalk line comes right here. So on a size small, you're going to be measuring 5 inches from the edge of the pants. And then I'm going to make that a little darker right here. Then we're going to be adding the 3 inches. So we added 3 inches to these pants, and now we need to take that away when we do the dart tucks. And so those two lines are going to come together. We're going to sew down them about 3 inches, and it's going to enclose it. So just measure the width of your front of your pants and then subtract 1.5 from the center, and then you can chalk that line in and then add the 3 inches for your next chalk mark, and that will set up these dart tucks. Now, then we're just going to be cutting along the inside just like normal. It does have a little bit of taper, but I do like to have that little bit of taper. And then we're going to be cutting the inseam just like normal, as well as the bowl. Now here I'm going to be adding the chalk marks. I want all sides of these pants to have the chalk marks so I can see where to come together, and then I can also see where I need to sew down. So this is me marking in the 3 inches to come down, but I'm going to also mark these lines on the inside to make sure that everything lines up perfect. It is better to over mark your pants than to under mark. So just like the front of the pants, we're going to go with the back of the pants, and we're just going to straighten out that taper along the side. And so once you have the taper where you want it, I love using this extra long quilting square. It just makes it so easy for me just to come right up, and then I can cut my pants like normal. And then for my waistband, I just folded down my fabric so it's on fold, and I'm doing a 1-inch elastic. And so I'm only going to measure my waistband to be 3 inches. It didn't record the first time I cut this, so I'm just showing you that you want to cut a 3-inch wide waistband, and you're doing it the exact same width as the pattern. And this is if you want to shorten the elastic to 1 inch. So now let's switch gears to these wheelchair accessible capris I'm making. Now I chose a woven poplin fabric because you know me, I love poplin and I do love woven pants. So these turned out so nice, and I love capris. I did choose the higher waistline because I am adding the elastic here. And then I did a nice dark chalk line where the cut the shorts right here line. So that cut the shorts I've used multiple times in this pattern. So just make sure that you can read those on your projector, because this comes in so handy because we're marking where our pockets are going to come. We do not want to have our pockets on the back or normally at your waist, because it's really hard to get things in there. And so I wanted to mark that on both sides because I added 2 pockets here. And so you want to have easy access, and you definitely need zippers here. So make sure you collect 4 zippers. You can have like some 7 inches for your thighs, but you may need to have up to 10 inches for your hips. And then we're cutting the back out just like normal without any markings whatsoever. And then we're cutting the widest waistband. I used a 2.5-inch elastic, and it gave this adorable 1/2 inch gather at the top of the waist. Like, these pants should be adorable. I want everyone to have cute pants.
So, up next, let's talk about these pockets. We did 2 totally different pockets here, and I'm so happy we did because I learned so much from both of these. Okay, so I think you guys know that sometimes I struggle with pockets. I do. I just don't like to have when it's my pants are tight and then I have pockets. It gives me the little chipmunk thing going on. Or if I put inseam pockets on and then I put my phone in my dress, my whole dress is like sliding to one side, or it's just really hard for me. I want to make sure that my pockets are always secured in the waistband. So that way it's not just the side seams holding it up. It's the actual waistband that's holding my pockets in. And so that is very important. And if my pants are not going to do that, or my dress is not going to do that, I'm not putting them in. And so that's kind of hard when you're dealing with trousers, because sometimes you don't want to have jogger pockets on trousers. So to be able to do these really nice, sleek side seam pockets that are actually in the waistband is like perfect. It's ideal for me. And it's a lot easier than doing seamstress pockets. So that's why I chose to do those. Now, for the wheelchair accessible pockets, you needed to have zippers. Having them on your thighs is the perfect place. Now, you can do these pants out of stretch denim or whatever fabric. So here in this video, I did one stretch and one woven. So you can choose whatever fabric you'd like to. You can even have them coming, at an angle to give it a little bit more character. And then let's say you don't need to add the pockets to your thighs. You can take these exact same pockets and put them on your bottom, and then you'll have 4 pockets in these pants. So let me show you all the details on these pockets.
Now let's move on to drafting our pockets. I love to use cardstock here because I often use my pockets again. And this, I'm doing a 9 by 6 rectangle. As you can see, the edges of this quilting square is a little beat up. I've had it for so long, but I need all different lengths here. I'm gonna be using all my measuring tools in this video, I promise. And then I'm gonna be cutting another one. So these are all 9 inches by 6. The first pocket we're working on is for the thigh pocket. So this is going to be on the black pants, and we're going to use an X-Acto knife or scissors to just make sure that we cut along straight on those lines that we have cut. I know I have another measuring tool out. It's different. It works perfectly. I use them all, I promise. That's why they look so terrible. So once I have this cut out with my pencil, I'm just going to write fold so I can remember. So this is going to be on fold, and then I'm going to measure down 1 inch, okay? And you're going to chalk that in or draw that in. And then we're going to come down a 1/2 inch, and we are going to draw that in with our pencil as well. And then we're going to come from the side, and I'm going to have it marked about 1 inch exactly on both sides. I am so sorry for all the airplane noise today, but once we have the 1 inch marked on both, we're going to cut out that thinner rectangle. And so I'm going to use my X-Acto knife again on this, and I'm just cutting along the edges just to make sure that it is straight as I possibly can get it. I love these little acrylic rulers. They're so perfect for this. And then you're just going to pop that piece of paper out. Now here is the one for the dart tuck pants that are going to be blue. And I have this lined up with my projector, and I'm just going to be marking how that thigh line works. And I'm going to be cutting that out as well as the higher waistline. And once you have that completed, then you're going to take some scissors that are not your sewing scissors, and you're going to cut it out. So once I cut out this side, I'm going to mark that, and I'm going to also mark the waist side so I can remember and I don't get it mixed up. So make sure you do all the proper markings and then just cut it out with paper scissors, not your fabric scissors. And then take your little pocket paper pattern over to your cutting table, and you're going to cut 2 mirrored pockets. So you're going to have 4 pieces in total, but you're going to cut it twice so they're mirrored. Sometimes it can get confusing, so I always like to make sure that I cut them mirrored, and then it's a little easier for me to remember. And then I have 4 instead of having to cut 4 times. I only cut twice. A little bit of a time saver. And then here we are with our black woven pants. So I love to have this on a fold. It just means one less seam in that pocket or one less place for a hole to happen. So we're going to cut with the fold at the bottom of this pattern piece. And then once you have it cut, use your chalk to mark the rectangle for the welt pocket. So let's get back to these dart tucks. So I'm going to be lining up those 2 chalk lines so they're kissing, and then I'm going to bring over the fabric. So those are 3 inches apart. So I'm going to be marking it at 1.5 inches on the inside and with it on fold. And then I'm going to be measuring down 3 inches, and I'm just going to be marking. And so this means that that little dart is going to come down 3 inches and stop. So here I'm starting at the bottom, and I'm back stitching. I'm using a lightning stitch because this is knit fabric. If you're using woven fabric here, you can just do a regular straight stitch. I'm just going to back stitch, and look how adorable. Isn't that such an easy little hack to add? Once you get the measurements going, you're going to be adding that onto everything. Now let's add on to this pocket. So first, we're going to need to do it just like a side seam pocket. We're going to be attaching it to our pants. I like to mark about 1/2 inch up. I did eyeball that about where to stop, and then I'm just going to be sewing it on the side of my pants. And so this is just, it's not that different than what you're used to sewing. So don't let it intimidate you. Just take it one step at a time. I did not add any top stitching or under stitching with this. So now that our pocket on the front side is sewn on, we're going to add it on to the back pocket. And again, we want right sides together. You want to make sure that you have the correct mirror, that it is tipping down with the waistband, and then we're going to mark it at 1/2 inch from the bottom. And the reason why we're doing this is because we actually need to sew the pocket shut, and so we need to be able to bring those seams together. So we're going to be doing the exact same here, just sewing it on. And now we're going to bring the front and back pocket together, right sides together. And we're just going to clip those pieces, and it's just going to make it really nice. And we're going to just sew up all the way around the pocket. Now, this is the easiest way that I could think of to make these pockets look nice and to work and be not anything that's going to be too difficult. So bear with me on this, just trust me. So we're going to be sewing down the side of the pocket, and then right here is the bottom. And so when we're about 1/2 inch or a little less from the bottom, we're going to be just sewing it all the way across. And so at this point, your pocket is attached, but it is opened all the way down the pocket. So it is not pocketing at this point. At this point, you just have a little opening in the side of your pockets. And so this is where it gets a little confusing because we need to close up that pocket. So you want to make sure that both those seams are lined up, and I want this pocket to be about, I've been using 3 inches on these pants. So I'm like, that is perfect for the pocket from the bottom. And we're just going to clip it together. So you just want to make sure that all these seams are perfectly lined up, and then you're just going to pin. And I even closed those, and then I'm going to top stitch this. So that's the reason why. And so we're just going to stitch on that seam, and we're going to close the pocket up at this point. And you want to make sure you back stitch because you don't want them to come undone. And then we're just going to be sewing all the way down these pants. And I'm using the lightning stitch. And the lightning stitch is usually very close. I think it's at a 3.5 millimeter, and it's so close that it can lead to ripples. So you definitely want to elongate it and test it on the fabric. Some fabric you're probably going to want to stop at 3, other fabric 3.5 to 4. If I'm top stitching and or if I'm trying to hem something with this stitch, I elongate it all the way to a 5. And then I'm definitely going to be basting these pockets over. So you're going to lay the pockets over, and I have that dart tuck open, and I'm just going to be basting all the way along so it's going to hold together. Now here we are with the welt pocket, and you see that little iron mark down the center? I actually ironed these pants in half, and I ironed my pocket in half, and then I could easily line up those 2 iron marks to know where the center of the pocket is, and then I lined up my serge along where that short line is. So I have, this is going to be right sides together, and I'm going to be sewing on that chalk rectangle. And so you can see I even have a chalk line that's going to be lined up with that iron mark. And we're just going to be sewing this rectangle like normal with a straight stitch. Now you want to take a look at your zipper and see if you want any of the cording to show. I know that when I'm doing this, I kind of don't like a lot of cording to show because it can show mistakes. But if you are really good at these little welt zippers, like you do a lot of bag making, you might want to show a little bit of the fun cording if you have that type of zipper. Now you want to open up the center of that rectangle, and then at the corners you're just going to cut a little triangle, and that's just so you can have your sides really nice when you flip it inside of it. So that's what we're going to do next, and make sure you take a lot of time at the ironing board for a lot of these hacks, especially this one, because you're going to pull everything through. And you're going to see right here with my iron, I took a while. I even came back after this and just made sure that this was ironed. You want to have those seams lining in the center, and you don't want them to one side or the other. And then you're just trying to get those rectangles as nicely as possible. I know it's really hard here, and I think, you know, you can try using, I've seen people use a rubber mallet to kind of hit these to make it a little better, but I think ironing inside and outside of this can definitely help as well. So I did spend some time over here, as you can see. And then here is my 7-inch zipper, And so you want to make sure that your zipper is facing up. And I have a lot longer zipper than I need, and I have it tucked in. Now this is pretty thin, and so it did take me a second to get my zipper pulled through, but I just feel like it's a little bit easier when the zipper's out of the way, and I think you probably would agree with me too. So there's my zipper, and I'm just going to be top stitching around the rectangle to top stitch in that zipper, but I'm only top stitching the top and the bottom. I'm going to leave the sides open because I need to still pull my zipper through, and then I can cut this and be finished with it. So let me show you how to top stitch it, and then I'll show you how to do the rest. And what I'm top stitching here, I know it's really hard to see because it's focusing on my hands, but I'm doing a 1/8 seam allowance from the edge of the pants. And you can see how I have that one nice. And you can see how little of the cording you're seeing when it's a little smaller, and it just looks even. I just like how it looks. I know with bag making and sometimes with some of these fashion choices, we really want to show all those little details. But if this is your first time, I feel like having a little bit less of that zipper showing is the best thing, especially with dress pants, right? And so here's where the zipper, you need to pull it through. And so it can take a little finesse here, but you'll get it. And once you get it through, you can open your zipper. And then I used some pinking shears here to cut it. Or you can cut with regular scissors and just melt it. And I did end up melting both of these, but I'm just showing you can use pinking scissors here. And if you don't have a serger, you can use the pinking shears all the way around that pocket so it doesn't fray, so you don't need a serger. So that is another tip with not using a serger. And then you can see how we're just going to fold back over that pocket, and we're just going to clip all the way around. You don't have to worry about the bottom seam. We're just going to start on one edge and sew this pocket shut. So again, at my sewing machine, I'm just doing a very small seam allowance. Again, my film did not work out on this one, so I ended up having to refilm it. So you do see the stitch there, but I wanted to show you how you just can sew all the way around that pocket. And then you have two pockets that are placed perfectly.
Isn't that so cool? You learned how to draft two completely different pockets. So whenever a pant pattern comes up and you want to change it up, you got this. And these are good size pockets. Like you can put whatever you need in them. So after we get our pockets sewn, we're going to be putting these pants together. And for me, I always like to do the bowl seam. It's called the crotch seam, but I always call it the bowl. So the bowl seam in one continuous stitch. I feel like this helps prevent your pants from tearing, because usually if they're going to tear, it's going to be in that center seam. And then adding elastic and a zipper can be kind of difficult because the elastic becomes so thick if you add it in with the zipper cording that it can get a little weird. So I was so excited when I thought of this way to handle it. And I think if you wanted to just have a pants with one side zipper, this would totally work as well. Or maybe you want to shorten it. So this is definitely a hack that I will be using again. And it's definitely one that you want to learn. And I think getting over that fear of zippers is so important. So I show a lot of different ways how I do different types of zippers here. And there's a reason for that, because not all zippers need the same treatment. So I hope you guys enjoy how I put these pants together.
So we're back with the knit pants. Look how nice those pockets disappear. Like you cannot even see those. And now we're going to be putting the back and the front of the pants together. So right sides together. And then we're going to be doing this is the inseam that we're going to be sewing down. Now, at this point, I was wanting to move a little faster, so I used a zigzag stitch. I feel like a zigzag stitch holds together really well, and it still lets your sewing machine move really quickly. And again, I'm going to be elongating this one to a 3 instead of keeping it at 2.5 because I want it to have, I don't want it to have any ripples in my sewing. And once you do one side, you're going to do it to both sides, and then one side is turned inside out and the other side is right side out, and you're just going to slip the right side out into the other leg. So you're going to have right sides together on the inside, and then you're going to be clipping that is at the center of your inseam all the way up to the back side and the front side. So this is your whole bowl right here that we're sewing together. This is how you get the one continuous stitch, is you have to put one pant leg into the other, and then you can just sew it again. I'm using that zigzag stitch. If you want to make sure that it's a little bit straighter and you can't see any of the zigzags, use the lightning stitch. And then I sewed both sides of the waistband together. So this had two pieces, and you're just going to sew down and make sure that you back stitch on those because you don't want those coming undone. You can already see how beautiful these pants are. So here's our waistband, and we're going to be adding those side seams or lining those side seams up. This is infinitely easier with those pockets basted on. And as you can see, this is the original width of the waistband of the Feel Pretty, and it fits perfectly on these pants because even though we added 3 inches, we sewed those 3 inches right up into those adorable darts. And then we're just going to clip this on like normal. So this is a waistband. So as we sew along it, we want to keep an opening. I like to keep the opening along the back, and we are just going to be doing a zigzag stitch all the way around. And because I wanted this a little tighter, I did a 1/2 inch zigzag stitch instead of the 3/8, but you choose whichever one works for you and whatever size elastic you would like to be using. I chose this elastic because it's a little bit more comfortable around the waistband, but I can only find it in 1 inch. And if you watched my elastic video, this is that ballet point shoe elastic, and it is just so nice. I've been emailing some fabric companies asking if they can carry it because it is so comfortable if you're somebody who does not like to have elastic around your waist. So hopefully I can have some recommendations on where to buy it soon. So, and then we're going to be taking the elastic and we're just going to be closing it up. And this elastic has a really great recovery, so you don't need to have it wider or too much wider than where it's going to be placed. And for these pants, it's going to be placed at your hips. And then once you get it all sewed together, the elastic in a box with an X, then you can just close up that seam right there, and your elastic is nicely encased. And then I always like to top stitch in my elastic because that keeps it from rolling, and so it makes these pants extra comfortable because there's nothing worse than having your elastic rolled. You just need to make sure that you're stretching your pants fully so you're not sewing over any of those gathers. These pants are just a little bit different. We want to make sure that we keep our side seams open because we need to be sewing in that zipper. So we need to get the bowl together. And so first we're going to be sewing down the inseam just like before. And as you can see it right there, and then we're going to be placing right sides together, and you want to make sure that your front is on the front side and your back's on the back side, so the zippers are touching. And then we're just going to clip around the bowl. And then you're going to take it back to your sewing machine, and I'm just doing a straight stitch here, and we're going to be sewing down the bowl of this pant. Now take a deep breath with me. You got this. So first we're going to be adding on the waistband, but we're not going to be closing up those sides. And then we're going to take our elastic and we're going to lay it against that seam because we need to know where we need that encased. And so as you can see, I'm just going to be marking right here so I can measure it with my sewing machine and go along the whole top at that length. So it's about like a 3/4, I think it was 3/4 of an inch exactly with my 1.5 inch elastic. Now we're going to take the elastic and we want this to be about half of what your waist is. And so I measured this exactly at 13 inches for both my front and the back. And then I'm marking this so I have 1 inch allowance on both sides for my zipper to be able to be encased without my elastic there. And I'm going to start pulling the elastic through. I'm just using a safety pin here. And once I feed this all the way through, I'm going to stop before it sucks in past that chalk line. So you're just trying to keep this elastic from not being at the edge of your pants, but being right at the chalk line. And so I still probably have about 1/4 of an inch. If you would like to add 2 inches onto your waist measurement and then trim it afterwards, you can, but I don't think that this is too bad, just stopping it when it's about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch past that chalk line. So as you can see right here, I'm getting everything lined up. And then I safety pinned this just to make sure that it stayed where I wanted to. You can use regular pins as well, but I did just keep this safety pin in when I was sewing. And so right here, you can see it got sucked in. And so then I had to pull it out, and then I added my safety pin. Okay, now over to the sewing machine. So I moved my safety pin out of the way, and I'm just going to be sewing on that chalk line and stopping it when it actually touches that little seam. And I did this on both sides, and then I wanted to have that cute little like shearing effect. And so every half an inch I straightened it and top stitched the elastic to give it that little shearing, crunchy look that we love so much. And so I'm going to do this one more time on these adorable pants. And I did the same exact thing on the front as I did on the back. So make sure you do both sides. The zipper is going to be used. It's very important for you to actually keep the metal stop in, which I know is just not enjoyable when you're sewing it to have that zipper in and you're gonna have to stop and move, but it's worth it in the end. We wanna make sure that this zipper lasts a long time. So here I'm just taking my zipper and I'm just chalking in where it needs to end, because this is a method that I often do with invisible zippers, but I wanted to use it here to again get it a little bit closer to the zipper than I normally would. So in a lot of this, I completed one side before I tried the other side and actually show you. So with right sides together, we are going to be clipping all the way down. Now, we're going to be moving when we're sewing this from a basting stitch to an actual back stitch and regular stitch here, because I like to actually have it sewed shut when I'm placing the zipper. So right here is a number 5 basting stitch. I'm also using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, so I could have fit into a smaller size, but I sized up on these pants because I knew I was going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I come to the chalk, I move down my stitch length to 2.4, and then I back stitch and I continue down the side of my pants. Now with the ironed flat, I'm going to put my zipper in, and I'm going to line it up with that seam, and I'm going to be sewing it on to that seam allowance. So I'm just going to clip it here. A lot of people like to use iron-on tape, or they like to hand sew it, but for me, I like to just take that side of the zipper with it open and line it up with that seam. I know this seems a little scary, but I like to be able to make those little micro checks as I'm going, instead of having to trust myself with like hand sewing it or with doing the zipper tape. Is it really where I want it to be? I just like having the control to make those little adjustments as I go, and as you can see, I'm making multiple little adjustments as I sew all the way down. Now once you get to the bottom, before you hit the zipper, you're going to stop and you're going to bring that zipper all the way to the top and close it, and then you can just line up that metal piece with the center, and then you can backstitch here. So again, we're just sewing this zipper onto that seam allowance. And then on the other side, I'm starting at the bottom, and I already know that this is going to be in the center, so I'm just going to make sure that my pants are not coming underneath my needle. And I'm also making sure that my seam allowance is lined up perfectly and everything is nice and taut, because this is what's going to bring the zipper right into the center. So you can give this a try, or you can do some of those other methods that you may be more comfortable with. So once again, I get close to that zipper, I'm going to stop, and then here you're just going to take your seam ripper, and we're just going to take out that basting stitch, and it's going to reveal our zipper here. And you'll see that it is right in the center. So this is very similar to the way that you're going to do an invisible zipper. And then we're just going to open up the bottom as well as the zipper itself. And we can go along just before. I wanted to have this not show the metal, so I'm going to be going just right before, and I'm just going to be connecting those two seams that I sewed to attach the zipper. Try not to go further. And then at this point, we're going to attach the top part of the other side of the zipper because we didn't attach it. I just stopped right there so I could open it up and then I could easily attach it onto the seam allowance without causing any issues. And so this is how I like to do these zippers when I'm trying to have the least amount of the size of the zippers showing. It goes on nice and smoothly, it's centered, and I like the look of it. Now, I did not top stitch it because, again, we're trying to just make this blend in as nicely as possible. And then cut the ends and just use a lighter to help melt it. My lighter is very low.
So the number one thing as a sewist that we get asked is, do you hem pants? Can you hem my husband's trousers? Oh, it's a number one question, and I have a hard time saying no. So, learning how to do a blind hem is very important for me. And so sometimes I learn it and then I don't do it for a while and I have to like re-remember. So I think throwing them in here and there helps me remember, and it helps me to get better at it so I don't ruin somebody's pants and then feel terrible and have to buy them new pants. So if you would like to ever try a blind hem, or if you are somebody who is hemming a ton and it's a little scary, we're going to demystify it right now.
So we're going to use our quilting square and our tailoring chalk. If there's ever tailoring chalk purpose, it is definitely for hemming pants, right? So we're going to just chalk all the way around. I'm just doing a dotted line here, and I'm just measuring 1 inch. And then we're going to take this over to the iron and we're going to fold it in so the chalk line is on the fold. And then you're just going to iron and create those creases, and then you're going to clip that iron down. Now, then you're going to fold up that hem. So you're going to fold it up, and right here I have the serge line. If you don't have a serger, you just want to have a 1/4 inch of the bottom of the pants, either with pinking shears or you can do a zigzag stitch so it doesn't fray. And then you're just going to sew along doing a blind hem stitch. Now I'll be going into more depth about the foot and the different stitches that are available, but how this works is with that serge sitting out, it's going to be doing 3 stitches on the serge, and then it's going to come up and stitch on your pants. Now there are 2 different stitches to pick from, and I will show you. One is for woven fabrics as well as one is for stretched fabrics. So let's go into that. So I'm going to show you on 2 different machines. So this number 18, how you can see it doesn't have a zigzag stitch, is for straight stitch for stick. And this is the G foot, and it has that little knife that comes up in the black piece. And it will say G foot when you mark one of these blind hem stitches. And then another stitch you'll see has a zigzag stitch. And this is another way you can look, and you can see them right there as well on this other machine. So here's 3 machines on how to identify them. Now here this is with the knit, and so this one I'm doing the one with the zigzag, and I'm going to try to give you the best view as possible so you can see that there's the 1 inch folded over, and I have it facing up, right sides together, and I'm just on that edge of that serge, and that black knife part is on where the fabric is folded, and it's just going to be zigzagging 2 stitches or 3 stitches onto that serge, and then it's going to be crossing over onto the pants. Now this with the knit fabric, you don't have to have the serge here. You just need to make sure that you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance in order for this to work properly, but it is really easy once you get the hang of it. It's not something that you have to be, just practice a little bit on some scrap paper, and that's what I always do before I start a project or if I hem somebody's trousers. I just give it a little test and make sure I have it correctly, and then you're ready to go because this is really easy.
Okay. Oh, so what do you think of my trousers? I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I'm for sure that it's a long one. And so thank you for sticking with me to the end. I really appreciate it. Make sure you put in the comments if there is anything else that you would like me to add to this series. I would love to hear from you. A lot of these are coming off of your comments. So thank you again. A like and subscribe definitely helps us. It helps keep us here every single week. And we just wish you happy sewing. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you next time.